Picture this. You're surrounded by people. Maybe you're at work. Maybe you're having dinner with friends. Maybe it's a family gathering. Everything feels normal. And then, without warning, someone says something about you. A joke, a criticism, a comment meant to make everyone laugh. Suddenly, every eye in the room turns toward you. Your heart starts racing, your face becomes hot, and your mind goes completely blank. Maybe you force a smile. Maybe you laugh along even though it hurts. Or maybe you become angry and say something you later regret. But hours later, long after everyone has gone home, you're still replaying that moment in your head, thinking about all the things you wish you had said. And that's where most people misunderstand the pain. The reason public humiliation hurts so much isn't because of what the other person said. It's because, in that moment, you felt powerless. You felt like someone else had control over your dignity. But here's something important to understand. People who humiliate others in public are rarely acting from strength. They're acting from insecurity. Confident people don't need to embarrass others. Secure people don't need an audience. Healthy people don't need to make someone else look small in order to feel big. In fact, people who constantly attack others are often fighting battles inside themselves. Think about a barking dog. It doesn't bark because the wind did something wrong. It barks because something inside the dog is unsettled. Human beings are often the same. Their behavior tells you far more about their inner world than it tells you about yours. And once you truly understand this, something begins to change. You stop taking every insult personally, because you realize that not every attack deserves ownership. Not every opinion deserves emotional rent inside your mind. But understanding this doesn't mean becoming weak. It doesn't mean accepting disrespect. It simply means you stop reacting from panic and start responding from power. Because when someone humiliates you in front of others, the situation becomes a test. Not a test of intelligence, not a test of who has the better comeback, but a test of emotional control. And there is one rule that changes everything. Whoever loses control first usually loses the room. Which is why the next thing I'm about to share might completely change how people treat you forever. Most people believe they need the perfect comeback, the perfect sentence, the perfect revenge. But emotionally strong people understand something different. They understand that the first battle is not against the other person, it's against themselves. Because the moment you react emotionally, you've already given away your power. When someone tries to embarrass you, they are expecting something: anger, defensiveness, embarrassment. They are waiting for you to explode or collapse. Either response gives them exactly what they want: attention, control, and validation. That's why one of the most powerful things you can do is surprisingly simple. Pause. Take a slow breath. Look at them calmly and say nothing for a moment. That silence may only last 2 or 3 seconds, but psychologically it changes everything. Because people become uncomfortable when they don't get the reaction they expected. Suddenly, the person who wanted to put you on the spot becomes unsure. They expected fire, but instead they found stillness. And stillness is powerful. Think about a mountain. Storms come, winds blow, but the mountain doesn't chase the storm. It simply remains. And because it remains, eventually the storm passes. Human beings are no different. People trust calm. They admire calm. And they naturally associate calmness with confidence. That's why the person who stays composed often earns the respect of the room. Not because they won an argument, but because they showed emotional strength. Another mistake people make is focusing all their attention on the person who insulted them. But remember this: everyone else in the room is watching too. And they're not just observing what was said, they're observing how you respond. Because your response tells people who you are. And sometimes your dignity isn't protected by having better words. Sometimes it's protected by having better control. You don't need to prove yourself to everyone. You don't need to win every battle. You don't need to destroy the other person. Because true confidence isn't loud. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. And it certainly doesn't need approval. In fact, some of the strongest people you'll ever meet are the quietest. Not because they are weak, but because they know something most people never learn. Self-control is a form of power, and people who master themselves become very difficult to shake. But staying calm is only the beginning, because sometimes silence alone isn't enough. Sometimes you need to respond. And when you do, there is a way to speak that makes people respect you without ever raising your voice. Sometimes staying calm is enough, but sometimes you need to say something, not to win, not to humiliate them back, but to protect your dignity. And that's where most people make another mistake. They think strength means being louder. It doesn't. Real strength is quiet. Real strength is clear. And real strength never needs to shout. If someone mocks your dreams, you don't need to argue. You can simply say, "Not everyone needs to understand where I'm going." If they bring up your past mistakes, you can calmly answer, "Yes, I've made mistakes. That's how I learned." And if they joke about who you are, you can say, "I'm comfortable with myself. That makes me hard to upset." Short, simple, confident, because long explanations often sound defensive. And defensive people are trying to convince others. Confident people don't need to. But here's something even more important. If this person has humiliated you more than once, then the problem isn't just what happened today. The problem is what they have learned about you over time. People test boundaries, and when there are no consequences, they push further, little by little, until one day they become comfortable disrespecting you in front of others. That's why emotional strength doesn't end when the moment is over. Sometimes, later and in private, you need to look that person in the eye and say, "What happened earlier can't happen again." No anger, no drama, no threats, just clarity. Because clarity is the language confident people speak. And surprisingly, it's also the language bullies understand best. The truth is, most people who constantly disrespect others are looking for easy targets, not strong targets, easy targets. And when they realize you are calm, clear, and difficult to shake, something interesting happens. They begin treating you differently, not because they're afraid of you, but because you've taught them how you expect to be treated. And that's something many people never understand. People learn how to treat you by watching what you tolerate. So before you leave this video, remember this. Dignity is not something other people give you. It's something you claim. Not through anger, not through revenge, but through self-respect. The person who tried to humiliate you was counting on your panic, your embarrassment, your loss of control. But that old version of you doesn't have to exist anymore, because from this moment forward, you know something they don't. Calm people are hard to break, and people who are hard to break eventually become impossible to intimidate. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments below, what's the hardest part about dealing with public humiliation? Staying calm, finding the right words, or letting go of the memory afterward? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, the strongest response is not always the loudest one. Sometimes it's simply refusing to lose yourself.